10 years ago, Michael Gove wrote a book called Celsius 77, which set out a certain approach to tackling extremism. I thought a decade later it was time someone from the left wrote a response. So Black Flag Down, I think, comes at an important time. Donald Trump is heading for the White House with a very conservative national security team. And with ISIS under pressure in the Middle East, there's a risk that foreign fighters could flood back to Europe and attack us here on our shores. So the book brings together a lot of frontline research in Birmingham and across the Middle East, proposes a new theory of radicalisation, and proposes some practical answers for change. So, Shiraz, now Donald Trump is heading for the White House. He's picking a pretty conservative national security team. Do you see risks with a change of US policy over the year ahead?
Well, I think one of the greatest things about this Trump administration is that we simply don't know what to expect from it. We've never really had that with anyone before who's been on their way to the White House. We sort of generally tend to have a clear sense of who they are and what they believe in and who their teams are as well. But what you can say is certainly some of the language that the Trump team has used, some of the people around him, and some of the people he's now starting to appoint has been deeply problematic. It does suggest this sense of polarization, this sense of othering citizens, particularly Muslim citizens. And I think anytime you have a society that is starting to be pulled apart and polarized in this way, it can pose a very significant challenge and be dangerous in the long run, yes.
And how do you think ISIS may react and adapt to a change of policy from Trump and his team?
Again, I think ISIS, in this sense, is in the same boat as all the rest of us, actually. It doesn't know what Trump will do. They'll certainly look to capitalize on his rhetoric to, again, suggest this idea of a clash of civilizations, to suggest that there is a Western-led war on Islam, for want of a better term. That's how they see the world. And so they'll certainly use a lot of that narrative and rhetoric to try and bolster support from their supporters. Whether Trump ups the nature of the military campaign and uses that in a more aggressive fashion, of course he said he will do. Whether that actually transpires or not remains to be seen. But again, if he does, then you would again see a lot of that playing into ISIS propaganda. But that's unclear at this stage.
And this comes at a time when ISIS is obviously under some pressure in Syria and Iraq. Here at King's, you've written the books on foreign fighters. Do you think there is an increased risk now in foreign fighters beginning to flow back and actually begin stepping up attacks here in Europe and elsewhere?
One of the things that we've consistently pointed out with regards to this conflict is you have to look at moments in time. It's been a constantly evolving, mutating conflict. So there are already returnees in Britain, France, Germany, for example, who've been out and participated in this conflict. They were people who tended to go in 2012, for example, with a sort of more romantic notion of fighting Assad and sort of fighting against tyranny. They compared themselves to people who fought in the Spanish Civil War. They were quite idealistic. ISIS wasn't even involved in the conflict at that time. And when they saw the nature of the conflict, how it changed, a lot of them tended to come back and disengage from it. Of course, there are others who are out there still who are quite a threat. So there was this view at some points in the earlier stages where you could have said, yeah, some people should come back and we can use them in counter-narrative programs. Clearly, those who are there now are a huge problem and a threat to us. And certainly, as we begin to squeeze ISIS territory, you'll see more people trying to return to Europe to pull off terrorism attacks because their base at home is shrinking. So there will be challenges. Just because we are crushing ISIS, removing territorial gains that it's previously had, and so on, that could actually begin to pose a more significant counter-terrorism problem for Europe.
So this is not game over by any stretch of the imagination?
Not at all. Not at all. I mean, it's not to even get into cliches about this is the beginning of the end or anything like that. It's simply just another chapter in this conflict, which will continue to manifest itself in the region and therefore impact the world. For the best part of a generation, I don't see how we can think of what's happening in Syria and Iraq today without looking at this and conceiving of it as a generational struggle.
So the government's working on updating Contest at the moment. There's a new Director General at the Office of Security and Counter-Terrorism. Are there things that you'd like to see in a refreshed and updated Contest plan?
Contest has a lot of hard aspects to it. You could say traditional policing, methods, intelligence methods, and so on. The most interesting aspect of it, from my perspective, is the soft power aspect, the prevent side of it, and that has probably been the most contested. It's certainly been the most politically contentious aspect of all of this. Where it heads, I'm not sure. It will again be for Theresa May and her government to see how they want to shape prevent. But one of the things that I've noticed, for example, is I think I'd want to see the government stressing the idea of secularism even more, and really trying to sell this idea that a secular space is what allows you to have a tolerant society, that allows you to accommodate difference. It allows you to be, you know, who it is that you want to be. And that's a fundamental strength of a society like ours, is that you can be who you want to be, whether it's irreverent or whether it's religiously conservative and orthodox, whether it's, you know, slightly wacky character or whatever it is you want to be. And so I've always thought, or increasingly have thought in the last few years actually, that that's something the government should be putting at the heart of that strategy, to tell people we're all part of this community and all part of the side, and we accommodate difference.
Yeah, and we're on the same side in this fight.
Exactly. And there are some great precedents for that. You know, in the First and Second World War, Britain raised some of the largest volunteers armies in history to combat fascism, and it raised huge numbers, hundreds of thousands of Muslims from the Indian subcontinent to participate in those conflicts. Muslims were side by side in the trenches, for example. They fought the Nazis, and of course they fought the Muslim superpower of the day, the Ottoman Empire, in the First World War when it came into the conflict against Britain. So some of these issues aren't as new as we think they are. People had to disentangle and look at those issues back in those days as well. And overwhelmingly Muslims stood loyal. They were partners in the society. And so again, it's a really strong message for young people who are sort of, I suppose, questioning their place in society, to say, you're part of the story of this country. You're part of what has helped make it what it is today.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Cheers.